The wind blew dust across the broken stalls of the alien marketplace. Shops once filled with voices and light were now silent ruins. Broken wires hung from tilted rooftops, and rusted metal doors slammed in the cold wind. It was a forgotten place. On the edge of Sector 9, where only the desperate came to trade or survive. On the cracked stone floor, near a collapsed stall, sat a girl. Her skin was pale, glowing faintly under the low red sky. She had long white hair, messy and tangled. Falling over her shoulders like threads of snow, her body was thin, almost starved, and her clothes were torn, barely enough to cover her. But the most painful thing about her was what wasn't there. Her left leg was gone below the thigh. She sat on a wooden stool with one leg bent, her other thigh wrapped in dirty leather. Her one boot pressed weakly against the ground for balance. She didn't speak, didn't look at anyone. Only a hand-painted wooden sign rested beside her, heavy. With quiet sadness, will work for prosthetic leg. It read in shaky black letters. Aliens passed her by without a second glance. Some were tall, some short, some in robes, others in thick armor. But none of them stopped. None of them cared. To them, she was broken, useless, invisible. She lowered her head as footsteps approached, then passed by again. Her eyes stayed fixed. On the dust at her feet, she hadn't eaten in 2 days. She hadn't spoken in 4. She thought maybe this was the end. Not dramatic, not loud. Just cold, slow, and forgotten. Then, another pair of footsteps, softer this time. They stopped right in front of her. She looked up slowly. It wasn't an alien this time. It was a human, a man in a dark coat, dusty from travel. He had a scruffy beard, tired eyes, and a small backpack slung over one shoulder. He stared at the sign beside her, then at her leg. His expression wasn't cruel or cold. It was quiet. She narrowed her eyes. Unsure, "Are you here to laugh?" she asked, voice rough like sand. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched down in front of her. The wind blew again, pushing strands of her hair across her face. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something, a protein bar. He unwrapped it halfway and held it out to her without a word. Her stomach growled, but she didn't move. "What do you want in return?" she asked, lips dry and cracked. "Nothing," he said softly. "Eat." She stared at him for a moment, then slowly reached out and took the bar. Her fingers were shaking. She ate it slowly, carefully, as if it might disappear. Tears pricked her eyes, but she forced them down. "You're not buying me?" she asked after a moment. "I don't buy people," he replied. "But I can help." "Why?" she whispered. "I'm not worth helping." He didn't answer, but reached back into his pack and pulled out a thin blanket. He gently wrapped it around her shoulders. The sudden warmth made her shiver. Nobody had touched her with kindness in years. "What's your name?" he asked. "Syra?" she said quietly. Her voice broke a little when she said it, like she hadn't heard it in a long time. The man nodded. "I'm Mason." She looked at him again, searching his face for any sign of a trick. There was nothing there but tired kindness. And something else, pain, maybe. "Can you walk?" he asked. She gave a small, bitter laugh with one leg. Mason smiled gently. "I'll carry you then." She froze, her heart suddenly pounding. "No," she said. "You don't have to." He didn't wait. He slid one arm under her knees, the other around her back. She gasped as he lifted her gently from the stool. The marketplace had stopped moving for the first time. Eyes turned to her not with disgust, but surprise. A human was carrying the broken alien girl, like she mattered. Syra clutched his coat. Unsure if she was dreaming. She hadn't felt safe in years. Now, in a stranger's arms, she felt something strange. Not love, not yet, but hope. And maybe that was enough for now. The sky above the ruins was turning pale blue as the sun rose slowly behind the broken buildings. Mason walked carefully through the dusty streets, carrying Syra in his arms. Each step kicked up small clouds of dust. But he didn't stop. Syra held onto his coat, her heart confused and heavy. She had no idea where he was taking her, but her body was too weak to fight, her spirit too tired to ask. And yet deep inside she wanted to believe this human wasn't like the others. They passed abandoned stalls and silent machines buried in sand. Most people turned their heads away, not wanting to look. Some stared in quiet disbelief. No one helped, but no one stopped him either. At last, they reached a small building. Half covered in vines and rust, the door creaked as Mason pushed it open with his boot. Inside was dark, with a smell of metal and oil. Old tools hung on the walls, and scraps of machines lay on shelves. A faded blanket lay on a dusty couch in the corner. Mason gently laid Syra down, then knelt beside her. "Stay here," he said quietly. "You're safe now." She looked around slowly, her eyes adjusting. The place was strange, but not scary. It felt lived in and safe. That word again, safe. She wasn't sure she knew what it truly meant anymore. Mason moved to a small cabinet. Pulling out a bottle of clean water and a metal cup, he poured it and handed it to her. She stared at it, her hands trembling, then drank. The water was cold, smooth, and real. She blinked back sudden tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked finally. "You don't know me?" He didn't look at her right away. Instead, he sat on a low stool and pulled off his gloves. His hands were rough, scarred, covered in little burns and scratches from years of work. "I don't need to know you," he said. "I just saw someone who needed help." Syra gave a bitter smile. "Plenty of people saw me. No one helped. I'm not them." He replied. Simply, there was silence between them, broken only by the soft hum of an old wall fan. Syra's eyes moved to a shelf near the window. She saw a framed photo, dusty and cracked but still clear. It showed a little girl, human, maybe 6 years old. She was smiling wide, sitting on the shoulders of a man who looked a lot like Mason. Her leg was missing below the knee, replaced with a shiny metal one. "That's your daughter?" Syra asked, surprised. Mason looked at the photo for a long time, then nodded. "She was," he whispered. "A long time ago." The air grew heavy. Syra didn't ask what happened. She didn't have to. She could see it in his eyes. He stood and went to the workbench, picking up a small device and turning it over in his hands. "I used to build legs for her," he said. "Light, fast, balanced. She used to race other kids, beat most of them too." Syra watched him in silence. His voice didn't break, but his hands tightened on the tool. "I failed her once," he added, almost to himself. "I won't do it again." Syra's heart ached, not for herself, but for him. He wasn't just helping her. He was trying to heal something in himself too. After a while, Mason turned back to her. "I can build you one," he said. "Not perfect, not pretty, but it'll work." "Why would you waste time on someone like me?" she asked, voice low. "I'm not your daughter. I'm not human. I'm not even whole." Mason looked her straight in the eyes. "You don't have to be whole to deserve dignity," he said. "You don't have to be useful to deserve kindness." That sentence hit her like lightning. She looked down at her hands, once soft and clean, now rough and shaking. Nobody had ever said that to her before. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she wiped it quickly. "All right," she whispered. "Build me a leg." He nodded, already walking toward the back room. "You'll need rest, food, and time," he said. "I'll take care of the first two, and the third." She asked quietly. He gave a soft smile. "That's up to you." Syra leaned back on the old couch, the blanket still warm around her shoulders. She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly. Why would a human care? She didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time, she wanted to find out. Syra woke up to the smell of warm metal and something soft baking. The blanket around her was still wrapped tight, and her new resting place, worn-out couch, felt almost too comfortable to be real. Her first thought was that it had all been a dream. The market, the human, the food. But then she saw him again, bent over a workbench, his back to her, Mason. He hadn't left. She sat up slowly, her body still weak. He didn't turn around. He spoke. "You're up." His voice was calm, quiet, and it didn't carry the coldness most others had used with her. He was holding a strange curved piece of metal, smooth and polished on one side, rough on the other. Beside it lay wires, gears, and glowing tools, most of them alien-made, but worn from years of use. "What are you building?" she asked, her voice still dry. "Your leg," Mason said simply. "But it's going to take a few days." Syra looked down at her wrapped thigh, then at the scraps on his table. "You really think you can make one?" she whispered, almost. "Afraid to hope. I built 10 for my daughter," he said without looking. "She broke every single one." That made Syra's lips twitch into the smallest smile. "What happened to her?" she asked carefully. Mason was quiet for a moment, then slowly walked to a nearby shelf. He pulled down a dusty wooden box and set it gently on the table beside her. Then he opened it. Inside were old things photos. Ribbons, a tiny shoe. There was also a model leg, made of wood and silver, small enough for a child. Syra leaned forward, her eyes drawn to every item. Mason reached in and took out a photo. It showed the same girl Syra had seen before, smiling, standing on 2 legs, one of them metal. She looked wild and free, like she had no fear in the world. "She was strong," Mason said softly. "Brave too. She didn't cry when she lost her leg. She cried when she couldn't run anymore." "What happened to her?" Syra asked again, this time even softer. Mason looked out the window. At the wind blowing through the ruined streets. "Ooh." "There was a raid," he said finally. "Pirates, slavers, no one came to help. She tried to save another kid. They took her." Syra felt her chest tighten. She reached for the small shoe in the box and held it gently. It was so light, so delicate. "You never found her?" He shook his head. "I searched for years. I never found a body, so maybe she's still out there." That small hope in his voice hit Syra deep. He wasn't just fixing her. He was chasing a ghost. Maybe by saving Syra, he was trying to save the child he lost. "I'm not her," Syra said quietly. "I can't replace her. I don't want you to." Mason replied, "You're Syra. That's enough." The words sat heavy between them. She looked at him, trying to understand this man. He wasn't like others. He didn't pity her, and he didn't want to own her. "I should have died in that market," she said, almost to herself. "No," Mason said firmly. "You should have been seen." Syra blinked, the sting behind her eyes growing. She hated how easily he made her feel. But maybe feeling again wasn't a bad thing. Mason walked back to the bench and began welding a frame. Sparks flew from the machine, lighting the dark room in pulses. "You'll walk again," he said, not looking up. "I promise." She lay back on the couch, the photo of the girl still resting on her chest. She didn't know if she believed in promises anymore. But for some reason, when he said it, she wanted to. Outside, the wind howled over the rooftops. But inside the workshop, there was warmth, light, and something she hadn't felt in years. Not comfort, not peace. Something stronger. Trust. The next morning. The sky outside was still gray. Clouds hung low like a heavy blanket. And the sound of wind brushing the walls was constant. Inside the workshop, Mason was already working before. Syra opened her eyes. The scent of burning metal and oil filled the room again. But this time, it didn't feel cold. It felt like progress. Syra sat up slowly. Adjusting the blanket over her shoulders, she saw Mason bent over the bench, goggles on, welding something small and delicate. Tiny blue sparks flew in short bursts. She could see the shape, now thin, curved rods that would become the frame of a leg. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Mason looked over his shoulder and smiled. "Still just bones," he replied, "but we'll get there." Syra swung her good leg over the side of the couch and tried to stand. She winced and fell back down with a thud. "Easy," Mason said quickly, rushing over. "Don't push it. I don't like being useless." She muttered, frustrated. "You're not," he said, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "Resting isn't weakness," she didn't believe. That, not yet, but she nodded anyway. Later that day, while Mason dug through boxes for rare parts, Syra explored the workshop. It wasn't big, but every corner had a story. On one shelf, she found a jar full of colorful screws. Beside it, a clock that didn't tick. She even saw an old robot head with a cracked eye, smiling like it didn't. No, it was broken. Then she noticed a drawer slightly open. Inside were rolls of old blueprints. She pulled one out carefully, unrolling it across the table. It was a design for a prosthetic leg, but not just any leg. This one was light, curved at the bottom like a blade, fast, strong, almost like it was made for racing. Syra stared at it in awe. It was nothing like the clunky scrap legs she had seen before. It looked alive. "Made that one for her 10th birthday, Mason said behind her, surprising her. She ran faster than the wind that day. "Why not build one like this for me?" she asked, pointing to the design. Mason shook his head. "Takes parts. I don't have any more, but I'll build you something close." She looked at him, eyes serious. "Promise." He met her gaze and nodded. "Promise." The next 3 days passed slowly, but not silently. Mason worked on the leg piece by piece, cutting, soldering, shaping, testing. Syra watched closely, sometimes helping hold tools or sort wires. She even began to laugh once when he hit his thumb with a hammer and swore in 5 different languages. At night, they ate together small meals, quiet moments. She told him about her old world, how she lost her family. He told her how he ended up in this ruined sector. Both stories were full of pain, but neither of them looked away. Then came the night he didn't return. Syra waited on the couch, watching the door. Time passed, the food got cold, and the wind outside grew louder. Her heart began to race. Had he left her? Had something happened? She struggled to move, dragging herself to the window. She saw nothing but empty streets. Hours passed, her chest tightened, her breath short. Then, just as dawn broke, a shadow appeared at the door. It opened slowly, and Mason stepped in, soaked with sweat and covered in dust. In his hands was a small, glowing crate. "I got it," he said. Falling to his knees, she rushed to him, helping him sit. "Where were you?" she asked, voice cracking. "Trade outpost," he panted, 30 kilometers south. They had the stabilizer. Syra looked inside the crate and saw it. A rare blue core, used only in advanced prosthetics. It pulsed with light, soft and alive. "You went all that way for me," she whispered, stunned. "I promised," he said, his voice rough but steady. Tears filled her eyes. She had been thrown away, sold, ignored. But now someone had walked through storms and danger just to keep a promise. She helped him to the couch, brought him water, and sat beside him without saying a word. For the first time in years, Syra felt something deep inside her shift. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was beginning to heal. The next morning, the sun peeked through the broken ceiling tiles. Soft golden light fell across the table, highlighting the almost finished prosthetic leg. It was beautiful, curved like a blade, reinforced at the joints and glowing faintly. With blue energy, Mason stood beside it, wiping sweat from his brow. He had worked through the night, fueled only by stubbornness. Syra had never seen anyone so tired and so determined. She sat silently nearby, wrapped in the old blanket, her heart pounding. Today was the day. The moment that had once felt like an impossible dream was now real. Mason brought the leg to her. "Carefully, this may sting," he said gently. Kneeling before her, she nodded once. Face pale but steady, she didn't blink as he attached the metal socket to the stump of her thigh. She didn't flinch as the stabilizer lit up and locked into place with a soft hum. For a few seconds, there was only silence. Then, she felt something, a vibration in her bones, a warmth spreading through her nerves, like a part of her body had returned from the dead. "Try moving it," Mason said quietly. Syra clenched her teeth and focused. The metal leg shifted, twitched then lifted. Her breath caught in her throat. She was controlling it. It listened to her eye. "I can feel it," she whispered, voice shaking. Mason gave her a soft smile. "Let's try standing." She hesitated. Fear flooded her chest. What if she fell? What if it broke? But then she remembered everything. The market, the cold floor, the sign by her feet, how no one had cared, how he had. She took a breath, grabbed Mason's shoulder, and pressed her new foot, against the ground. Her other leg followed. She wobbled, gasped, nearly collapsed. But Mason steadied her. "Easy," he said, gripping her arms gently. "You're doing it." She looked down in disbelief. She was upright. Her weight was balanced. Her voice cracked. "I'm standing." And then she let go of Mason. One step, then another. The metal leg hissed quietly as it moved. Stabilizing her, she stumbled forward, reached out. Caught herself on the table. She was laughing. Tears ran down her cheeks. But she laughed. A real laugh. The kind she hadn't felt since she was a child. Mason just stood back and watched. His arms crossed, his face unreadable. But his eyes were full of light. She turned to him, wiping her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice broken and strong all at once. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," he replied. "And you did this. You." Stood, Syra reached out and hugged him, not out of need, but out of something more. Trust, gratitude, and something new growing between them. Later that day, she walked with Mason back to the market. Her steps were slow, uneven but hers. The people stared again, but not in disgust this time. They stared in silence, unsure of what they were seeing. The broken alien girl who had once begged with a wooden sign now stood tall beside a human. She wore her metal leg like a badge of honor, and her chin was high. They reached the same spot where she once sat. The stool was still there, now covered in dust. She walked up to it and picked up the wooden sign. She stared at the words, then dropped it on the ground. "I'm not for sale," she said softly. "Not anymore." Mason smiled beside her. People began whispering, some backing away, but one figure didn't move. A tall, armored alien stood at the edge of the crowd. His eyes locked on Syra with a dangerous glare. She froze, her heart skipping. "Mason," she whispered, her voice tight. "That's him." "Who?" "The one who owned me," she said, her voice now trembling with fear and rage. "He's the one who sold me." Mason's eyes narrowed. The man didn't speak. He just turned slowly and vanished into the crowd. Syra's body trembled. She thought she was done being afraid, but that old terror returned in one breath. Mason placed a hand on her back, steadying her. "He's not getting near you again," he said calmly. "I promise." And this time, she believed him with every part of her heart. The sun had fallen behind the broken towers of Sector 9. Shadows stretched long across the dust-covered streets. Syra sat quietly on the edge of the old workshop's rooftop, her new prosthetic leg resting beside her. The cool breeze brushed through her silver hair as she watched the stars blink into view. She should have felt proud. She had stood, walked, even smiled again. But ever since she saw him in the crowd, the alien who once owned her heart hadn't stopped racing. Inside the workshop, Mason worked quietly under the dim light of a hanging bulb. He had noticed the change in her, the way her shoulders stayed tense, but he didn't push. He just waited, ready when she wanted to speak. She came down the ladder slowly, eyes on the floor. "He's here," she whispered. In this district, Mason looked up, his jaw tight. "The one who sold." "You?" She nodded. "I thought I was just a thing to him, like an old tool. But he followed me. He saw me walking, and still. He watched like I was his." Mason stood and walked to the door, locking it with a heavy bar. "We'll leave this place if we have to," he said. "I won't let him touch you." "No," Cyrus said, voice stronger now. "I won't run again. I want to face him." Mason blinked, surprised. "You sure?" She looked up at him, fire in her eyes. "I want to show him I'm not broken." The next day, she returned to the market alone. Mason trailed nearby, hidden in the shadows, keeping watch. Syra walked with her head high, each step steady, her metal leg clicking softly against the stone. She passed the same stalls where she once sat invisible. Now every eye followed her, some with curiosity, others with quiet respect. But one pair of eyes burned with something darker from the corner of a ruined archway. He stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, his armor dull and scratched from years of cruel work. His face was hard, but his smile, that was worse than any blade. "Well," he sneered, "look at you, got yourself patched up. Who fixed my broken little toy?" Cyrus' heart thudded, but she didn't back away. "I'm not yours," she said, "and I never was." He laughed coldly. "You were mine the day I bought you, remember? I have papers, marks, everything legal." "You had nothing but chains," she replied, voice tight. "Chains don't make ownership." The alien stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think a metal leg makes you powerful? You think that human cares about you? Wait till he gets bored. He'll toss you aside like everyone else." Syra didn't answer right away. She looked him straight in the eyes. "No," she said calmly. "He carried me when I couldn't walk. He didn't look at me like property. He looked at me like I mattered." The alien's face twisted, his voice rising. "You're coming with me whether you limp or crawl." He reached for her arm, but a second hand grabbed his wrist, strong, human. Mason stood between them, eyes dark with fury. "You need to walk away," Mason said coldly. "Now," the alien snarled. Throwing a punch, Mason ducked and slammed his shoulder into the alien's chest, sending him backward. The market froze, onlookers staring in silence as the two fought. It wasn't clean. There was blood, dust, shouts, but Syra didn't hide. She stepped forward, grabbed a metal rod from the ground, and when the alien tried to rise again, she swung. The rod hit his arm with a crack, and he fell to one knee. She raised the rod again. Breathing hard, he looked up at her, fear flashing in his eyes for the first time. "I'm not yours," she said again, louder this time, "and I never will be." Guards arrived, local enforcers called by the crowd. They looked at Mason, then Syra, then at the alien groaning in the dust. "Slave trade marks." One guard muttered, scanning him, "Illegal now in 3 sectors." The alien was dragged away, cursing and spitting. Syra didn't watch him leave. She turned to Mason, who was breathing hard, blood on his lip. "You all right?" she asked, worried. He gave a shaky laugh. "Should have let you swing first." They walked home together, slower this time. Syra's legs sore, but her spirit light. No more running, no more begging. She had faced the one who made her feel worthless and walked away standing taller than ever. The workshop felt warmer than it ever had before, even though the walls were still cracked and the wind still howled outside. Inside, there was peace. Inside, there was healing. Syra stood at the workbench now. Hands resting on its surface, she wasn't just watching anymore, she was helping. Fixing a broken circuit, rewiring a power cell, she moved with confidence, her steps strong and steady. Mason sat nearby, cleaning an old mechanical arm. His lip was still bruised from the fight, but his eyes looked brighter than before. "You? Learn fast," he said with a smirk. Syra looked up and smiled. "I had a good teacher. For days now, no one had come to bother them. The slaver was gone arrested. Shamed and removed from the streets he once ruled, and the people who had once turned their eyes away. Now they greeted Syra with nods, sometimes even respect. But she didn't need their approval anymore. She had already found what she needed." Later that evening, Mason brought out a box, old and wooden, worn by time. He opened it carefully and held out something wrapped in cloth. Syra unwrapped it slowly. Inside was the racing blade, the same design she had seen in the blueprints. Light as air, shaped like a crescent moon. "I told you I didn't have the parts," Mason said. Syra's eyes widened. "But why?" "I needed to know if you wanted to stand again," he said. "For you, not for anyone else." Tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away. "You saved the best for last." He nodded. "You earned it." He helped her swap the old leg for the new one. It attached perfectly. Humming softly as it locked in, Syra stood. Testing her balance, it was lighter, smoother, faster. She laughed and took off running through the workshop. Around shelves, past tools, out the back. Door into the night, her feet kicked up dust, and for a moment, all that existed was wind and stars. Mason stepped outside. Watching her sprint across the ruins, she jumped, spun, landed. She was free. When she finally returned, out of breath but glowing, she stood in front of him. "I feel alive again." She whispered. "You are alive," he said, stepping closer. "And you're not broken?" She looked at him quietly, her chest rising and falling. "Do you still miss her?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Every day. But helping me did it help you too?" He looked down for a moment, then met her gaze. "Yes," he said. "It reminded me that some things are worth saving. And some people are worth believing in." Syra reached out slowly, took his hand in hers. The night was quiet now. No chaos, no fear, only the feeling of two people who had survived something heavy and were still standing. "I don't want to leave," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't." Mason replied, "Stay." They didn't need to say anything more. The silence between them was full of understanding. Not broken, not owned, not hidden. In shadows, Syra had found something far greater than a prosthetic leg. She had found a home, and someone who saw her as a person, not as damaged. Not as less, but as whole. The stars above flickered gently. The wind moved softly through the ruins, and inside that little workshop at the edge of a forgotten world, two souls who had once been broken began something new. Not broken, not alone, just human, together.